Hello, how's it going, everyone? Good luck if you're in Black Friday, Cyber Monday, but this video is going to be more about how to optimize and how to test creative for Meta and how to know what's actually working in the first place, because a lot of times people are pausing the wrong ads, they have the wrong angle, they don't know what to do now, they're trying to be too proactive and not really knowing what to look for when we're reacting to the actual messaging that we're getting back from our customers, because that's really what you're paying for in the first place. You're paying for data, so I'm going to show you guys how we look at this and just pretty much from a simplistic view, understand how really easy Andromeda is once you kind of crack the code on a creative. Now, that is to say that omni-channel is another factor that comes into play that's very complicated, but we're going to keep this simple. So anyways, if you are running Andromeda and you're running the one campaign structure that we have with the one ad set, and you're throwing all the creative into one ad set, and you're essentially allowing it to build the funnel and seeing what it's doing inside of the spend. Over here, you'll see high spend to low spend. One creative tends to be the winner, and then the spend kind of fatigues more and more and more, and you get sort of an average of everything on the bottom here, whereas the spend is more, pushed towards the top, I would say. Another scenario, and I would say that this general structure where there's kind of a pyramid is what I would say is kind of like your standard funnel. I know it's kind of reversed, but this is kind of to visualize it too from what the spend is. So this is, I would say, a very healthy funnel, because your middle of the funnel is consistently getting, a couple different angles, and then your bottom of the funnel is getting a bunch of angles, and then maybe this low area over here with the low ad spend is maybe your creatives that aren't necessarily resonating with a lot of people and aren't really converting as much. ROAS tends to probably fluctuate in the top 3 positions, not in the bottom 2 over here for the most part. So this is a standard funnel, super basic, super simple, straightforward. This is a pretty healthy funnel per se. If you are not very heavy on creatives, then your funnel probably looks a little bit like this, right? So you have one creative that's doing really good, that's getting a really good ROAS, and it's getting all the ad spend. And then you have the rest of the creative that's kind of sitting in limbo over in this middle to low ad spend range, and not really picking a winner out of these. They're just kind of somewhat supporting the main creative in the first place. So I'm going to show you guys how to kind of fix both of these scenarios, or look at it from both of these different scenarios. So the first thing that I want to cover is I want to make sure that we understand the beginning principles of when it comes to advertising and marketing, right? Like when we build an ad, we're trying to hit a pain point of an individual user and trying to solve a problem, right? So if someone is cold, we want to sell them a jacket, right? The pain point is cold, the product is the jacket. We can talk about the features of the jacket, which emphasize the pain point more. Maybe someone wants something that's more durable for a jacket, so then they want something more longer lasting, right? So there's you can have the same product, but different concepts or different hooks, pain points, whatever you want to call it. And so the goal here is to understand what pain point is working and then build off of that with different formats. So if we notice that the pain point that's winning, like I was saying on the jacket, is people are cold, they want to get a jacket, pretty straightforward. Then we would add more variability to how we're displaying that messaging. So if we were to say on this creative over here that the concept is, like I said, people want to stay warm, this jacket makes you, warmer, blocks the cold, waterproof, right? Things of that nature, and it's a UGC ad, right? So we know that UGC works, and we know that the offer is staying warm, right? If we notice that the overall efficiency of our P&L starts to fall and the results in the account also start to fall, then we have to look at a couple things. So the first thing that I would say that we want to make sure of is if it's a seasonal product. So if you're selling jackets and you're going into summer, you're probably going to have less demand, so you need to hit on another pain point. That's pretty common sense, right? Pretty straightforward. So no pushing in the ad account is really going to change that. It's going to be, we have to change the overall offer in the first place. We want to talk about maybe waterproof or something else that would give us a reason for someone to buy the product when it's warm outside. Maybe there's a discount, there's an offer, right? So there's more things we can kind of lean into, but that's typically the first area that I would look at. The other area that I would look at too is if anything changed omni-channel, so if anything changed on Google or any other outbound channels that you might be trying to run ad spend to in order to generate more traffic. Now that leads into the main problem, which a lot of people are running into when it comes to Meta, is warm traffic. And what that means is that you're essentially paying for repeat users, not new users. Super obvious example is you want to have someone that buys from you for the first time versus someone that has bought from you 10 times when you're spending on ads, because you don't grow a business by having repeat customers, you grow a business by having new customers. And so we want to focus on that. And the default in the algorithm's eyes is just to go after purchases or leads, right? It's not really going after, like, it doesn't go after the KPI that you want it to as like a default, right? Most people just say, oh, I see a good ROAS, we're going to lean more into that. So what I would recommend doing, if you haven't already, and this is what we do for a majority of our accounts, I would say 99% of them, is we have CAPI imports. And the reason why we have CAPI edge tag imports is because it allows us to feed the algorithm the right signals to then push it closer to the direction of the KPI that we want to move in the first place, which is our ENMER, or our cost to acquire a new customer. We want to reduce that as much as possible. Now, if you want to know more about edge tagging, I have another video on that that I did about a couple months back that talks about the differences of edge tagging versus standard tagging. It's extremely important that you understand that first, because a lot of tools will say that they're great and they have CAPI imports, but that's not what I mean when I'm talking about CAPI imports. I'm talking about edge tagging, so it's more accurate data, and it's all click-based data, which is what we're stuck with when it comes to accuracy and quality, and then that will feed the algorithm the right information. So anyways, with that being said, how do we optimize creative if our P&L is getting worse and worse and worse and worse? Well, it's typically based on the ad spend up here. So let's assume that we've kind of gone through that checklist that I mentioned, where it's not seasonal. We're not running into competitor issues where our offer is just not as good. And maybe that is the case, we'll get into that in a moment. Or we're in a scenario where, the overall shipping costs went up, like something changed externally. We want to make sure that's not the reason as to why we had to increase our goals or change our goals or change the price or anything of that nature. So let's assume all that's been figured out. Once that is understood, then we can say, okay, it is probably a creative issue. And the reason why we say that is because we've checked all those other things, and we say maybe there's a competitor in the space that has a better offer. How can we build creative to emphasize that our product is better than someone else, or that our offer, our business is better than going with that other person? And if you can't do that, then I'm sorry, you don't have a good marketing plan. You need to come up with one. You need to talk with a team that can help you in order to do that. And this is why it's extremely important to start with that first before you blow a bunch of ad spend and waste your money there. So if we are in that scenario, then we say, okay, let's throw in some more untested creative based off of the winning creative. So if we can say, okay, competitor is offering a 20% discount on the product, and so it's 20% cheaper than ours, then you can either come at it from the angle of, okay, let's match the price and recreate the creative geared towards price, or we can say why the product is more valuable and why you're paying that extra cost to justify the fee. You can test that with still going after the original concept of being, trying to escape the cold per se, but you want to test out what other market conditions that you're seeing, how you can kind of answer that in the first place. So we want to throw tests like that in there, and then we also want to throw a test where we say something on the lines of, instead of pushing a UGC formatted ad on like how to stay warm during winter, let's say, you maybe try a founder's video and say, hey, I'm a founder, I wear this product, here's try different angles of the same message, just in different formats. So it could be, like I said, founder's video. We already tested UGC, so we're not going to do that, but we want to test something like us versus them, maybe us versus the competitor, anything that would be more geared towards features and benefits. Things that are face to camera, whitelisting. I mean, there's so many things that I can kind of go through on general different formats that you can try. Ugly ads, anything of that nature, and we want to also throw that into the mix. If we are noticing that ad spend is not going to these untested creative and it is in the bottom area, meaning that it's matching all of these other creatives and it's a totally different format than these, then I would say that this creative, if it has not dropped an ad spend whatsoever and you're still seeing your overall performance drop, then we are in the ballpark of saying, okay, how closely correlated are these creatives to this creative concept? If we're using very, very similar concepts, then we're not really, or very, very similar situations of this creative versus this creative, then we're not necessarily going to have a major impact. Like, you could justify that there's maybe some overlap that's going on here, that this one is just winning out on those ICPs. So then the next batch of creatives that you want to test is going to be more geared towards trying other concepts, right? So we want to try other angles that are not geared towards just staying warm during winter. We want to try talking about, like I said, maybe waterproof or some other things that would cause someone to buy the product or the jacket that you're going after. And so once we've tried this, and let's say this still doesn't work, and these go down into the middle area over here, the next option then I would say is actually pausing this creative in the first place and forcing ad spend to then try other angles. Now, what tends to happen is people will say, oh my gosh, I want to pause the creative because it's going to cause the P&L to tank. Yes, it probably will cause the P&L to tank. However, the key thing that you're looking for is understanding the lag time that it takes from a user to go from hearing about you to converting in the first place. And so when we're testing this new creative, once it rotates over, we might say something of the nature, we might look at it and say, okay, if someone is clicking on an ad, it takes about 7 days for them to convert. Then I need to wait at least 14-ish, about double the time range. I would say 1.5 to double the time range of that lag time until I start to see a trend going up. Doesn't have to be profitable right away. I'm looking for a trend. I want to see a reversal in how the overall results of the KPI I'm looking at is changing. Because if we are going down and continuously going down with the original creative and then it shifts over to starting to arc back or flatten out, positive signs, stay the course, keep going, wait for another signal to come back and give you that, correlation to the change in creative getting better and better results. Now, you might run into a scenario where it doesn't actually get to the results we're at previously, and that's when you then go back and you reiterate and you throw more onto the mix and you start that cycle again. The reason why we want to make sure that we test those two things first in the cycle is because we want to give the algorithm the ability to replace that top performing creative maybe in the second section, or sorry, the winner. Let me actually make this a different color, make it easy. This winner, and I'll actually do this, in another part of the funnel that it might actually work better in, right? So it might be a scenario like this, where all of a sudden this, this creative moves to the second layer, and then the untested creative now is the winner on the outbound side of the equation, and the winning creative is in the second place scenario of the funnel. And then we find out that, hey, seasons change, years change. Now this creative moves up to the top, and this one now moves down to where this other one was at, right? So we're reacting to the environment to better understand what is going on with our ICP. We're not trying to force our ICP to see, oh, you need to see this part of the funnel, and now you need to see this part of the funnel, right? We don't want to do that. That's the old way of doing it. We want to react to based on what people's journeys are doing in the first place to then build off of more middle of funnel creative, more bottom of funnel creative, more top of funnel creative. And we look at that based on spend levels. So this is kind of a general crash course on that, but I just wanted to give you guys that first example. The most important thing in this entire process is picking the right KPI, which is probably going to be something like cost per qualified lead, or if you're e-commerce, ENMER or ENCAC, in order to grow the business in the first place. If you look at ROAS, or if you look at overall MER, you're not really going to be able to diagnose what levers you pulled and then what caused that overall MER or ROAS to go up, because it's going to attribute warm traffic from all the other channels as well too. So keep that in mind when you're doing this, but really appreciate you guys watching this, and good luck out there in the Black Friday Cyber Monday if you guys are watching this right as it's released, because yeah, it's a crazy week and a lot of people are freaking out. But at the end of the day, look at KPIs that matter, don't focus on ROAS, and you'll be in a lot better scenario than majority of these people out there doing this stuff. So anyways, thanks again, and I will see you guys in the next video.